I'm Erica Hollingsworth, and you're listening to the F1 podcast.
What's up, everyone? It is Ricci here from the F1 podcast. Happy July 3rd. We're recording this a couple of days after the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix, which saw George Russell claim a surprise victory after Verstappen and Norris dramatically collided in a battle for the lead. But we have a lot to talk about in this week's episode. Andrew Cleary is here. Erica is on vacation. Andrew, how are you doing, my man?
We are so back. We are so fucking back. I am pumped.
I'm not fucking leaving. I totally agree. I think it just was really exciting this weekend. It was July 1st, past long weekend. So happy Canada Day to a number of our followers. Shout out to some great listeners, the F1 North, Ferrari Club of Toronto, and as well as a lot of the people that have attended at Trinity Common. And it is the 4th of July tomorrow. So why not send a happy 4th of July to our American listeners, Allison and Lynette from the I Give an F1 podcast, and Brian and Rob from Dirty Side of the Track podcast.
They are great F1 content creators, and it's really cool to see how much North America has grown in terms of the F1 scene for that content development. So, yeah, shout out to F1 North, Ferrari Club Toronto, also to Allison and Lynette, and Brian and Rob. Enjoy your extra long weekend, because there's no way you go to work on the 5th when the 4th is a Thursday.
And like, how are you supposed to have like office chats with what happened this past weekend?
I mean, that would be like a cooler conversation for about an hour.
Cooler, coffee, anything is possible.
Oh.
So George Russell being the 5th driver on the grid to win the 2024 Austrian Grand Prix. Also the 4th constructors, can you believe it, Andrew, that has won a race this season?
I mean, if you looked at Bahrain and you saw Max with like 20 seconds over his own teammate, you were kind of like, oh boy, here we go again. Another season of just tumultuous, Max win, Max this, Max that. No, it is kind of emanating like 2010 all over again. We have 4 constructors on top of the podium and 5 drivers. And to think that both Red Bull teammates have not even won a race, it's been both Ferrari teammates that have won one. Checo's just kind of hanging out in 8th place the entire time while the rest of the people start to scrap for the fight, for the win.
So I don't know if you saw this, but in the post race episode that they highlighted that George Russell was the first driver to win GP3, FP2, and F1 on a grid. Apparently, so he's apparently very successful at the Austrian track.
So he's won at all 3 like major levels, I guess you would say, in the Formula Series.
According to the post race, yeah, and so
that's incredible. I mean, to be honest with you, he shouldn't have won this race at all.
The sprint, would you say it was a really exciting sprint? I don't really remember that much. I mean, there was a couple of good laps towards the end. Yeah, I know the McLarens did look good too. So,
going into the sprint, or going into Austria just in general, we were like, this is going to be the Max versus Lando show, or I said that at least last week. Kind of like, how that was going to pan out. And it turned out to be an incredible episode this past weekend. But yeah, starting with the sprint, we had Max just edging out Lando in the qualification by, I think, like a 1/10 of a second. So really close in terms of times there. And then when the race started happening, we had Max just absolutely battling it out with Lando for P1 and even Oscar Piastri there for the first like 6, 7, 8 laps. Right after a a weird formation lap. I haven't seen it where they had to do a second formation lap because apparently the media were too close to the wall.
That's what Kim Illman was saying, that they were all lined up, I guess, on the first turn, and then all of a sudden they said nobody was allowed to go there, and they red zoned that whole great area. And it's like, can you imagine if you're a photographer, you've waited hours to be in that specific spot, and then for them to tell you, oh no, you can't film here anymore.
Yeah,
or shoot here anymore.
And then you lose a lap of the sprint because of that kind of last minute judgment call, I guess. So, but anyways, it didn't really matter once Lando kind of went for a move on Verstappen. It didn't pan out. Max ended up taking it back from him, which then ended up with the lead back from Lando, which then allowed Oscar to kind of jump Lando too. Or it was around like lap 7 or 8. But unfortunately, due to that, at that point, just Oscar wasn't able to keep up the pace to Lando in that, or to Max as much as Lando probably could have. So Max won by a comfortable 4 seconds in the sprint race at that point, which gave him 8 points. His partner in crime, Sergio Perez, finishing P8, like 17 seconds behind him for 24 laps. So you almost kind of wonder, oh boy, if that's going to be the length of gap between the two teammates. What's that going to be like then on Sunday? But McLaren scoring more points than any other constructor that on Saturday. So if you're Erica, you got to be feeling pretty good going into Sunday, considering that for the time that Lando was behind Max and fighting for position P1, there was some good racing going on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think there's some other notables here. Sainz got the jump on Russell with a fine move around the outside of turn 4. Hamilton held 6 over a fast starting Leclerc. Perez and Magnussen and Lance Stroll and the Alpines, they're duking it out for the top 10 places. And yeah, having kept Piastri behind, Norris was like totally ready to go for the attack. And there were moments where it could have happened, but I mean, Max was able to hold off the fast McLarens, and I think we started to see that a little bit more of that battle like onto Sunday. But I think overall, like, weather held up. Like it was a beautiful day for a great sprint, and especially I really like all the fan seating, and I do like, I can't believe I'm saying this, the Max Verstappen, the orange section. That's always kind of cool to see.
Good sprint Saturday, and it was quite an event on Sunday. Because let's be honest, the first 50 some odd laps of the race were just, and this was evident during the sprint in terms of qualifying itself. Max had like a 4/10 qualification lead over Lando, which was unheard of basically at the time, in my opinion, because of how close they were racing on like at the sprint on Saturday. So to finish 4/10 ahead of Lando and the rest of everybody else was like, what a monster lap from Max to begin with. And then he kind of kept that edge through to Sunday, where he got off to a pretty big lead overall in terms of timing. I think it was really warm in Austria with the softer tires, like of the sets of the C5, C4, C3, created some interesting pit stops. But unfortunately, lap 1, Ricci, we had some contact already out of the gate for Charles Leclerc. So what were your thoughts on kind of that overall incident, getting sandwiched by Piastri, and I believe it was Sainz, I want to say?
Yeah, I think it was Oscar who clipped him in the end. It was just like one of those things where, I think there was pressure on Ferrari, because we definitely there's been, McLaren has clearly been the better car lately, and, the emergence of Mercedes. So, I mean, Leclerc's race was pretty much over the minute that he had to like pit for a new front wing. And it was tough. And like, there was no way that you were going to come back from that.
Poor guy, eh? Ever since winning Monaco, he had, what was it, a double DNF in Canada. He had engines issues in Spain. And now this, like, the dude literally sold his soul just to win it home this season, it sounds like, because this guy's got just rotten luck throughout the rest.
And even Sergio Perez signing this contract extension, like that voodoo doll or whatever you want to call it, is like sitting on his back, and he's not been able to recover. So it's like, I think a first, I guess, this season has been really throwing some people off. Mind you, I think we did obviously see some really good racing in there. I mean, Toto can be very happy with this weekend. I don't think they were anticipating on winning the race, and his job being the P3 man, he's like, I'm just going to focus on my race. I'm just going to watch how, Piastri and Verstappen, how they're going to race. And like, look, we've had this happen in a couple of other races throughout the year, Andrew, where, people have just been casually back. If they're 15, 20 seconds behind, nobody around them, they're just kind of the waiting game to see what happens. And I mean, can we just take in how Toto Wolff yelled in his mic the minute he was going on a straightaway? It makes up for Canada.
It was in the braking zone. He literally called it the most embarrassing moment of his entire F1 life, in that he would like to have that back, because he's literally screaming at his guy.
all I gotta say, right place, right time, feels good. It makes up for Canada, I think I've read online.
But I think, like, so I think this is a real big question we have now because now that we have Max versus Lando now, Lando, it is kind of now starting to emulate like Lewis versus Max in 2021 after this weekend, right? Max had a big lead going into his second and final pit stop. They both pitted at the same lap for the mediums, and then they both pitted on the same lap again for the hards. I think it was like lap 50 something, I forget. Anyways, nevertheless, Max is what, 6 or 7 seconds ahead, maybe 8 seconds ahead of Lando by the time that pit goes in. But
And,
he has go ahead.
yeah, and then I was just going to add, I think this is what you're about to say, and then they have that like longer than normal pit stop.
Like a 6.5 second like pit stop, like really slow in the blocks because they couldn't get the left tire out, which then created like which then just dropped the gap to like 1.8 seconds. And I don't know, I find it whenever this happens, like there are events during the course of a race that kind of lead to these collisions, in my opinion, right? And Max, generally what happens is when he gets a frustrating pit stop in the lead or like, lengthwise, we saw this in Monza in 2021 when Max had like an 11-second stop against Hamilton, right? When they were battling for the lead in Monza, then he was trying to make up for that, really frustrated on the radio, right? And then, Lewis had kind of like a 3.4 second stop. And then by the time that, the timing that they came out, right, they collided going into the first S or, the first chicane there and basically took both teams out, right? So it kind of had that kind of same feeling in a way where, Max has maybe a little struggle with, having to, he's really frustrated in the sense that he already had like this 8-9 second gap for the lead. And now it's back down to 2, 1.5. And now he's got Lando breathing down the back of his neck for, has to be 15 laps at the time.
And we're starting to kind of, I don't know, maybe, well, this is a question to like our fans, but we're starting to get that, that rivalry of 2021 back again. And I think this is what I think now Max Verstappen is starting to notice that, maybe this year has not the runaway season that he wanted. We've talked about it earlier with 5 different race winners. He doesn't have the hugest of leads. Yes, I think it's 50 something points that he has, and he was able to recover from the collision from 5th place. But like, someone like Lando Norris is not afraid to dive bomb into some of those corners. He is obviously a quality driver, and he's won 3 championships because of his driving abilities. But sometimes I guess it's under the pressure that you maybe make those like silly mistakes or you get more frustrated. I don't know what it is, but it's starting to get a little bit chippy out there.
Well, yeah, you could tell based on the way he had to race Lando in that sense, right? Because at the points where Lando was, either dive bombing him into turn 1, kind of turn 1 was kind of, or sorry, turn 3 was kind of the main area where these attempts on track were trying to happen, right? And
yeah,
or even after key straightaways too, right? Where Max would, slightly move under braking. To me, it looked like he did because Lando would go through a way, he'd dive bomb down a certain area, and then Max would like, move one way and then cut back to, while slowing down to kind of, create that, reduce that space for him to stop, right? And there's multiple times on the radio when Lando would kept complaining he was moving under braking and stuff like that too. You could see it, a little bit there for sure, even like it was confirmed afterwards in that case. So, that kind of just pent up aggression and, drama in terms of like over the radio, right? You could tell both teams were getting frustrated.
The stewards got involved. Sorry, my apologies. Got involved much earlier. Then some of this kind of racing would have potentially be prevented. I mean, if I can quote one thing from Reddit, quote, dive bombs, weaving, banging wheels, taking each other out, fans yelling and crying. This is proper F1. If the stewards got involved earlier, like then probably this bent up aggression but the collision that happened, this is going to be a question that Lando and Max need to have one-on-one. Like, listen, Schumacher and Mika Häkkinen were famous for having these conversations. Like, listen, if this is how you're going to drive, this is how I'm going to respond. Is the dive bombing really appropriate for Lando Norris? Probably not, but also Max is not really giving him any space on the racing line.
Well,
look, it can go both ways.
because now here's the issue also too. During the race, Lando got slapped with a black and white flag for track limits, right? And in the future, and if he was to get another track limit, it would have been a 5-second penalty, right? Knowing that was coming to him, or I think it did come to him anyways, right? with the black and white flag. So knowing that, Max knows out now he has to stay within the lines in order to not create any more controversy in that case on his end with the stewards. And I think that's what also led to the collision into turn 3 because Max, there's like a 3 car width space to put between in turn 3. Like it is quite a big corner. And Max took up 2.5 car widths or 2.2 car widths or whatever, right? Enough so that he forced Lando to go off onto the side. Now, this is where I love F1 Twitter because people are either on one side or the other of this analysis of where Lando's car should have been. One's blaming that Max, completely took, as Fernando Alonso once said, all the time you have to leave it the space.
All the time you have to leave a space.
The problem is that he didn't leave a full car width at the end of the day when he was veering off left. And he was veering off left. You can tell by the overhead cam, everything. He was veering off left. But then there's also this case too where you keep it within track limits because same moves have happened before in the past, and this was where Max defenders are, is that in previous people have moved onto the curbing where half their cars on the track and half their cars in the curbing, which is still legal by track limit standards, right? As long as all 4 tires are off, then it's fine, right? So it depends on what side you are. And this polarizing effect has rippled down into Twitter. And I swear, I saw some of the best content on Twitter from the past 3 seasons online this past weekend. And thank God, because people are now back, are fully like,
You had the team.
let's just say they have made F1 great again in that sense.
Yeah, the team McLaren fans, and then the team Max Verstappen fans, and then all of a sudden this ripple effect of team Lewis Hamilton fans just came out of the middle of nowhere. It's like, oh, Max racing dirty. Oh, can we tell you about 2021 again? Funny because I know this is a nothing award, but Lando Norris apparently won driver of the day, and then think about
which is BS again.
Yeah. For this one, I agree because Nico Hulkenberg and Kevin Magnussen have terrific drives. First time that the Haas's have been both in the points as well. You had Daniel Ricciardo P9. I mean, Alpine had P10.
Oh, yeah, there's plenty of choice. But again, this is just a BS fan vote. And so everybody's like, oh my God, Lando, yeah. So they vote for Lando, right? They don't care about the race. They just vote for Lando for the sake of voting for Lando because that's all they care about is a Max challenger. But it was funny because Will Buxton on F1 TV before the race took a video of front wing from McLaren. There was like a razor's edge on one of the sides, kind of like on the end plate, right? And you're saying, well, if you make contact with this, you are going to get a puncture. And boom, spickety doom, that happened because you could see it as he was making the turn. His tire wheel was off. Like his tire was off the wheel. And then based on the collision, Lando ended up getting caught back and he got his kind of, was it rear left, kind of, or rear right done. And his race was effectively over, trundling down, ripping the tires and ripping the car up for 3 laps. But it was an accident, Ricci, you could see coming from like a mile away at the time. Because again, comes to the notion is Max a dirty driver? Or does he drive with his elbows out? Because every world champion does this. Schumacher does it. Hamilton has done it. Even Vettel did it before in the past, right? They drive with their elbows out. They give it's razor blades, right, on those edges, and they try to give you as less space as possible, while quote unquote trying to stay within the rules. And as you mentioned earlier, the stewards do nothing about it during the race to create any to create any guidelines, and they let them quote unquote race, and that's what it leads to.
And I think some people could argue was it really necessary for him to put the elbows up if he already has such a significant lead in the drivers' championship? Was it really worth it for that extra, maybe, I don't know when you call it, what I think it's 7 points?
In my opinion, I think that just creates a loser mentality amongst the driver because, as a driver, what's your goal? Always to win, right? You're never going to want to be saddled for second place. And he got that question asked by Scott in the post-race comment, which I thought was it was pro-Lando, obviously, very pro-British of Sky to ask that question. But he's not going to say, oh, yeah, I'm just going to let it go because I got such a big lead. No, that's just not his mentality. His mentality is to win all the time, right? Seek greatness in that case. And sometimes, unfortunately, this is what the end product of that becomes. And there were times in 2022 when him and Charles were battling, especially earlier on in the season. And the nice thing to me, that racing was competitive, but it was fair. And I think, this one was a little bit on the edge where, Max probably should have gotten a warning or two for braking, for moving under braking, right? In that case, unfortunately, that's what kind of led to the result, right? When you kind of when you get away with it so many times, and you just, fortunately, he rides the gray, right? He is the one driver that just consistently rides the gray zone with regards to these moves. And unfortunately, that was just over the line this weekend. But John, my question to you is, whose fault is it? Take the penalties aside. Like, who do you think is at fault?
I mean, you shouldn't really be nosediving. Like, if you're nosediving, you can't just expect that like the stewards are gonna like. I played enough online. I've nosedived. I've gotten in trouble. Like I've ended up in the sin bin. Like I don't know. It's tough because I think if you are the world champion, you do not want somebody to like like some of the greatest athletes. They're not going to be buddy with you in a sense. Like they're going to prove their reason why they're number one. They're going to give you a little tussle and, maybe something when the ref's not looking, like a little cheap shot. It happens. Both are guilty. I mean, I don't like that saying when Lando Norris says, I didn't do anything wrong. Some of your tactics are a little questionable. And I think both of them just need to sit with each other on a private plane to Silverstone and just say, hey, let's discuss going through the season. And then it's not that I'm trying to be a Switzerland here. It's just that like I think both parties are guilty. And yes, I think the caveat, if like the FIA jumped in earlier, probably we wouldn't have seen a collision. But mind you, like when they collided, like, this is what we love. This is what we love. And then like, look, it was like George Russell, man. Like, again, he gets Mercedes win, another win. Like last one was in Brazil 2 years ago. So
Your comments, John, because I think it's by both parties, it's their own fault at this point, right? Because there's so many things that go into it. And I hate being neutral in that sense. A mixture of Max not leaving as much space and Lando not moving over and, playing it somewhat safer. He had an opportunity. I think if he moved over, in my opinion, if he moved over, he could have had an opportunity for a switchback, kind of force Max to go deep into that turn 3 corner the way he was driving, and then take a inside line off of that potentially and trying to beat him then on the inside of that with the DRS because you got it. So I think, in my opinion, it's both. But 10-second penalty for Max, I think was fair. In my opinion, unfortunately, it did cost Lando the race, and Max only moved down to P5. But that's kind of what they're giving out nowadays is 10 seconds for causing a collision, right? They're not going to give 25, 20. That's just the new stewards, how they go. But I think the post-race reactions were immaculate, considering that both of them were side by side in the pen the entire time, saying shit about each other.
Not only that, but the social media accounts, just like McLaren tweeting about how even the Sky Sports agrees with us, or Red Bull tweeting about it's like, oh, we're off to Silverstone, and it's like a bunch of like swords on them, like walking into the lion's den, if you want to call it that per se. Because now I think that having Mercedes and now McLaren is now competitive makes Silverstone going to be even more exciting to watch. And the fan reaction, if Verstappen wins again, there's going to be a bunch of boo, boo heading towards him.
Like what I'm excited for is the fact that, what I guess what makes me most excited is that we have a race immediately the week after this incident, right? No waiting around.
Yeah.
It's like, it is pedal to the metal for this race coming up at Silverstone, right? Max is obviously going to be the absolute villain on track, but you know what? I think he's going to take that in stride. And it's gonna be a dogfight this weekend coming up between Lando and Max. And honestly, I can see the same result happening again, where there is gonna be a collision between the two of them, and it is not gonna be pretty.
And like we've seen collisions there at Silverstone before between Max and Lewis. Like maybe Mercedes is like the GOAT pick here, because if they both collide again and then Russell just wins another race, I don't think he's gonna be safe. But yeah, I think
about a guy who literally did nothing all race. Like, I hate to bring back, but did nothing all race and finished P1. In order to finish first, you have to finish, right? And that's what George did. He finished the race. waiting ahead. And the post-race comments in the cool down room were hilarious about how, Oscar and Sainz were kind of like joking around. And then Russell says, "Oh, we probably shouldn't laugh about it." Yeah, because then Oscar goes, "Well, yeah, mate, that crash basically gave you the win."
It's good that they have all this banter with each other. You love it. And yeah, and like I could only imagine what like the fans would see at like I don't know. Just like there's a lot to talk about. So let's talk Silverstone. Obviously, it's a very historical track. We've seen some great races there. Lewis Hamilton has won that a lot. Has won at Silverstone most. I think he's got ace race wins there. I don't even know how many Verstappen has. I think he only has one or two max, but I mean, what are your thoughts kind of going into Silverstone? Like you think we just talked about this 2 minutes ago. Like, how is McLaren and Red Bull going to respond? My eyes are going to be on, let's talk to the elephant in the room. And I like, it's sad that we don't talk about the other drivers that much, but like, Ferrari did not have another good weekend and something's clearly going wrong with the car. I don't think, did Carlos deserve to be on that podium? Probably not, but he got blessed with some collisions in the front based on the result of the car lately.
Yeah, like for Ferrari, it's kind of like we're in an unfortunate valley right now, right? In terms of performance. Peak was Monaco. And now we're kind of dipping down in the valley. Like Charles Leclerc may have to go do like a ayahuasca or something to like get this bad juju away from him. For Silverstone. Carlos, yeah, you know what? Hey, again, you have to finish the race in order to kind of finish up on the podium, really. And, that's what he was able to do. Was he fast this weekend? Not particularly, but you know what? Hey, still finishes P3, picks up the scraps, hits some key points, right? And there's some cases where that happens to you on the other side. The one person I'm really worried about is Max Verstappen's teammate, Sergio Perez.
Yeah.
Because let's just put this out here for 1 second. Max collides with Lando, trundles on 3 tires all the way from turn 3 to there's like 70% of the lap to still go to the pit where you pit for 4 wheels and he gets a 10-second penalty. Sergio Perez finished 17 seconds behind him with the penalty and all that happening. That is miles behind. And then not only that, he was overtaken by a freaking Haas and Nico Hulkenberg. So, like, if you're Red Bull, that is scary. I just got to wonder what the hell does he got to do this weekend in order to get out of his own mind, right, and race freely.
Think about it. RB is not in a hurry to confirm their 2025 lineup. Saying that the team is lucky to have junior options. Whether they put Sergio Perez there, and the British Grand Prix is going to mark the 3rd Formula One race weekend, with Ollie Behrman being part of the Grand Prix action, driving in free practice for Haas once more. And people have already talked about, I think Haas is going to make their announcement on their next driver this weekend. And it's like, can you imagine if it's Ollie going into the car and that it's him? And I think there's a number of other junior drivers that are practicing. I can't find it in my notes here, but
I think it's Isaac Hadjar. Don't quote me. I think is it Hadjar? Or someone's driving Checo's RB20 free practice 1.
Franco Colapinto will be doing his FP1 appearance for Williams, as the Argentine has already received significant backing as he's joined his strong debut season in season 2. And then, Jack Dohan will do another run out with Alpine. Typical British weather forecast, let's expect the rain. And they're suggesting, based off numbers for this weekend, 480,000 people attending the 2023 Grand Prix. That number could even be even higher this year. I could only imagine. So, I mean, Silverstone never disappoints.
I think we're going to see some really great quality racing this weekend again. Despite what happened, but I wonder if Alpine can keep their point streak up. Pierre Gasly was able to score P10 finish for Alpine, going, again this weekend for them. Daniel Ricciardo, he scored, P9 in Austria. He used the undercut to great effect to jump those Alpines. So I can't remember if the undercut or the overcut is a really big strategy in Silverstone, but then there's an opportunities for undercuts. That's where it's going to be. I do say though that this is really going to be a put up or shut up weekend for some of the people that are, really going into who have no contracts next year, right?
Mhm.
Like we have Joe not having a contract next season. We have Valtteri Bottas not having a contract, right? Like it's I think for some of these guys that don't have contracts, Silverstone's a great opportunity to showcase their power, potentially in the car and how fast they can be, especially with this, the summer break's only 3 Grand Prix away. So, and Carlos needs to, I think everyone's waiting for Carlos to move first, and then the chips will fall. So it's a matter of really being able to cement your case as to why you should be on the grid for next season, this coming race.
This coming race and basically to the summer break is going to be like make or break for a number of drivers. And I know it's always bouncing back between, is Carlos going to go to Williams? Is he going to go to Alpine? And it's just like, is Mercedes still an option? I don't think it is, but he's been rumored to go everywhere but anywhere, and it's until that he decides.
I don't know. I'm excited to see what's going on this weekend because I have a feeling this is just only the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, I'm gonna my prediction is I think it's gonna be a Mercedes win this weekend, because if there is a bet on collision, that should be in the minus, and because it's gonna probably happen again.
I'm gonna go over. I'm gonna go off the deep end this weekend. I think Lewis Hamilton is going to win again at Silverstone. I just have this weird feeling that he wasn't happy with his P4 finish last weekend. And seeing George win in a Mercedes is going to just motivate him to win. There's going to be some collisions on track, and Lewis is going to be powered by the backing of the Silverstone fans, and he is going to finish P1 this weekend in front of his hometown and finally get his home crowd and finally get a win on top of the step podium, because I miss him up there, to be honest with you.
So much to talk about in next week's episode of the F1 podcast. Andrew, always a pleasure to sit down with you and talk Formula One. And thank you to all of our fans who've submitted questions and thoughts on this past weekend in Austria. So tune in next week. I think we're going to be recording on Monday, which we'll be covering the British Grand Prix. Will Max Verstappen and Lando Norris collide again? Will Mercedes get another surprise win? Where will Ferrari figure out their woes and get back onto the podium again and keep that Constructors' Championship interested? Time will tell, but make sure you tune into the F1 podcast. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a great day.